All right, so on today's episode of the Zach Clark Show, we're going to hear a lot about the evolution of gambling, from the envelope, paying the bookie in the barbershop, to the rampant growth of online apps and the ease it is to place bets. Today, I have Brian Dolan, someone who's in gambling recovery. We're going to get into all of it. It's a good listen. Come along. 750,000 people between the ages of 14 and 21 struggle with this addiction, and I'm excited to talk to an expert and someone who's battled this addiction today about gambling. Full disclosure, I gamble. I place bets. I have FanDuel on my phone. It's so easy, and I'm so fascinated by what's about to happen. So today we have with us Brian Dolan. Brian is the director of the Collegiate Recovery Program at Sacred Heart University. He was just featured on ESPN, a piece that Jeremy Schaap did, accounting one of his clients' journey into gambling recovery. And he's going to enlighten us today. Brian, what's up?
Grateful to be here, excited. This is a hot button issue, and I'm ready to get into it with you.
So I got to start with the gas. There's this story that you tell. So like myself, Brian is also, I can share this, in recovery from substance use disorder. And we have a lot of mutual friends, and we've become closer over the last couple months here. But anyway, there's this story you tell about entering into rehab for the first time. And it kind of relates to can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wild story. And, I basically, I think a lot like substance use. I was super dishonest. I was lying a lot. To my family. I was in trouble with you're talking about 2016. So you're talking about a completely what we call like an underground market, right? Just bookies, illegal bookies for gambling. Yeah. So completely different landscape, to your point about today, of how accessible it is. So I had gone to my parents, who had already been dealing with this for a long time, and I also have at this point, an 8-ball a day cocaine habit.
So you're basically gambling and putting an 8-ball of coke up your nose daily.
Yeah. So basically I graduated college, and within a year I went on this, I'd been gambling before I ever touched alcohol and drugs. Gambling was a part of my life at a pretty young age. And
what's young?
I mean, I remember just like such great memories of, me and my dad filling out brackets, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
Me and my buddies just like racing off the bus in the middle of March. We were hoop guys. We were, that's just what it was, that young. So yeah, I mean, it had presented over and over again. The drugs and alcohol had presented, and my family, I lie. We see this a lot in problem gambling is, let's say I owe somebody $10,000. I'm going to use that fear with my family, right? And say I owe them $15,000, pay the bookie, $10,000. Now I got $5,000 for, my coke habit or whatever to keep me going. And
so you go to your old man, you say, Hey, Dad, I got a problem.
Yeah.
I'm down the whole 10K. Yeah. But in reality, I'm down 15.
Yeah.
In reality, you're down 10, so you clip another 5 for yourself.
I was really down 20 and asked for 30. Nice. And yes, so 23 years old. So I lie. I keep betting. I keep using. And this is, parents are divorced. I know how to split them. They're finally getting the education like release provides. I'm in trouble. And so I placed this big bet, $12,000 bet, Packers-Lions game. Game ends in an Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary. I had the other side. I had the Lions. So I walk in.
I remember, was it Monday night? No.
It was a Thursday night.
Thursday night game.
Yeah. And so the first time I ever walked into a detox facility, a guy comes up to me and says, "Why are you here?" Now, it's been an 8-ball a day for a while. It's a lot of alcohol consumption. And I go, "Did you see the game on Thursday night?" Because if that game goes the other way, I'm certainly not in this detox. And that's, one of the differences between gambling and substances, right? Like I always think I got another day, another shot, another way out,
Yeah, it's interesting. That's crazy. And did you end up, what happened? You might go to detox, like did you?
Went to detox, went to residential, got exposed a little bit, moved to Brooklyn. Dawn Gallagher, shout out. She was my first exposure to AA and her sober house. So I would always kind of present.
She lived in the townhouse.
I lived in the townhouse. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And at this time, are you like from a gambling perspective,
sure.
like, are you go to rehab or detox and you're like, all right, I'm not going to gamble, or you're like, this isn't really a problem?
I would talk about it. I would say that the treatment center, I mean, nothing against them at all, but like, I would, actually at the time, Dawn had somebody that was working at the house that would also go to GA. So I get my first taste of, recovery-ish. I'm going, but I'm not really working a program. So yeah, I'm honest about the gambling. I go to a little GA here in Manhattan, but I'm just
That's
not.
Gamblers Anonymous for those
Yes.
of you guys that are listening, which is like the 12-step version of AA or NA. So Gamblers Anonymous, right? It's like problem gamblers meet and they try to help.
Yes, exactly. So golf was a big part of my story, big part of my initially gone to Sacred Heart as to play. And I mean, I didn't because of drugs and alcohol.
Can you still play?
Not like I used to be.
And were you a hooper too, or no?
Not the college level, but I mean, I love sports, and I can get more into that too. Is like, and that's a lot of the people I work with. The identity is so intertwined with that, right? Like, think about you're a baseball player, right? Like, what are those memories that you have, of baseball?
Yeah, win at all costs.
Yeah,
and we don't win today, we're gonna win tomorrow. Right?
Yeah, competitive, but also like there's this healthy relationship. And like when you're really working with a problem gambler, you're trying to smash that a little bit, right? Like you got to step away from the world of sports. You got to step away. So it's really hard. Like the profile I'm seeing a lot is ex-athlete, uber competitive, and it's how young men communicate, right? Like who you got tonight? What's the spread? Who are your picks? It's in your face. But yeah, so
I should mention real quick too, just Brian also has his master's in mental health counseling. So he's not just a guy. I mean, like you've done the work, you've got the education, which is, I think, helpful for people to hear, even though I have zero education, but go ahead.
You have a lot of education. You do a lot of work. And so I started going to the rooms a little bit, and I have this presentation of, this golf trip, Keel Island, unbelievable golf course. And
you hadn't been gambling going into this
I hadn't been
trip.
gambling. It's right around 90 days, right? Family friend, they're going to fly me down there. I just got to show up and tee it up, right? Everybody in my life is telling me not to go, right? And I go down there, simple $100 a man for 3 days, stroke play. Like it's very simple, like nothing crazy. But to me internally, like what I had just gone through, that was a relapse. And boom, I was out, moved out of the townhouse and, was in my own apartment. Then I lasted a couple months, ton of guilt, shame. Like, what am I doing? End up treatment center number 2.
And are you, at this point, I'm just trying to think about it. Are you more concerned about the gambling, or are you more concerned about your drug and alcohol use?
I think that at this point, I'm trying to not surrender to all three, right? I'm trying to say I can still gamble, or I can still drink, or I can still, right? I looked at them separately, right? I looked at them individually. So yeah, I last a couple months on my own. I was not ready. I was in Brooklyn, and I just, I quickly go treatment center number 2. But what's presenting more in real time is the substance use. Like that's what's meeting criteria for, my insurance through my employer to get me in there and, things like that. So I go to Seabrook House and, same type of thing. I moved back into the townhouse for like a month.
Which
but,
is so Seabrook's, that's a treatment center. That was
Yes.
actually my first treatment.
Yeah,
So we share
got
it.
it,
We're like,
got it.
we're pals in that
Yeah,
class of 2010. What?
nice.
Did not stay sober. Okay, so you go to Seabrook House,
Yeah.
end up back in New York.
hmm
Go ahead.
From there, I mean, it was the darkest next 16 months of my life. I mean, I had this job. I was supposed to go see clients every afternoon. I'd go in the office from like 7 to 11.
What were you doing for work?
I was like in account management. Yeah. You know, I was
Got it.
I was sick, you know, and so I basically spend the next year and a half like hijacking, you know, relationships to live with them, and you know, I'm just basically lost, you know, but I'm unwilling to surrender, and now I can't afford the coke like I was when I was red hot gambling.
Did you go on some heaters? I mean, were there some time like
there were some times.
Yes.
There were some times. I mean, yeah, like you remember that Seattle Pats. I'm a Massachusetts guy, so Patriots Super Bowl. I mean, I can tell you a story of like 3 guys being under 25 years old having to combine 50 grand on that game. Game ends with that interception. I mean, we went nuts.
Yeah.
We went insane. But like honestly, the first thing I did was go and grab cocaine. You know,
Right.
like it was never enough. Like very similarly to drugs and alcohol. So yeah, I mean, I had
that's the
some
point. I think
moments.
that's just like what people miss about gambling and why I'm so concerned about, because we're going to get into hopefully some of the solution here.
Sure.
Because you have turned your life around, but the winning a bet affects the same part of the brain that a Coors Light or a line of Coke or a blunt or sex affects. So, I mean, that's why I have so much concern around this gambling thing. But I just wanted to highlight that. Okay, so you had some heaters, and this next 16 months you're struggling, and how does it all?
Yeah, I mean, I was so at this point, what my life would look like was and now again, to remind you, completely different landscape. What I mean by that is I needed to, even way back in my college days, I'd burn a bridge with a book, you know, a bookie. I'd say, I'm not paying you. Or, you know, we'd get into some altercations. Not proud of those moments, but, you know, I was a kid. So I would actually have, you know, I'd be gambling and then I'd be drinking, or I couldn't surrender to all three. And I had used like suicide as, you know, a way to get bailed out, right? Like I had used depression and all this fear and insecurity that I had to.
Wait, hold up. So you would, with your family, or
with my family, yeah.
So you would basically go to them and say, like, I'm gonna kill myself.
Not that directly, but like I had the depression. I mean, there was right before Seabrook, actually, my mom came down to pick me up. My mom's like from a small town. She hates driving in the city. She picks me up. A credit card had just come in the mail. You and I both know I'm not going to treatment with a little bit of money on a credit card.
Right.
So we drive like 1 block, and I jump out of the car and say, I'm going to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. And I just go ghost for like 5 days, you know, like just absolute ghost. My mom's like, doesn't know where I am. I mean, thanks to women like Dawn and other people that were there for her, but it was like, it was dark. It was deep. So then I come back out and, you know, I'm still not ready. I still can't surrender. And then, so I would say that when I said that in the moment, like the Brooklyn Bridge thing, I didn't mean it. I just, you know, I was angry. I had deep-seated trauma. I had, you know, stuff.
I'm thinking about your mom in that situation, bro. Like, and I'm thinking about all the parents out there that may be listening to this, because on one hand, there are people out there that are going to say that and then actually do it, you know, and they mean that. And there's people out there like you and myself who might utilize that to, you know, get them to co-sign another day or week or month of our behavior. And that's terrifying for a parent. And I think it really just highlights this whole thing that we're talking about.
I agree. And to that point, like statistically says, it's not the right phrase for it, but like successful suicide attempts are, by problem gamblers compared to substance use, compared to other forms of addiction. So it's like
most people to die by suicide,
a higher percentage, right? Not the most amount, but it's like you can't really talk about gambling without talking about suicide, right? They're pretty intertwined. So yeah, I never really felt like that. I'm living in this apartment in Brooklyn, and I now that thought was like kind of real for me. Like I was afraid to go into, down in the subway because I might, like I was afraid, and that scared me enough. So, long story short, I call my mom and I'm like, hey, and it kind of, I'll get into this more, but back to the sports, I somehow still have this job, and I'm like, I can go back to this treatment center, Mountainside. They have an indoor basketball court. She's like, you don't get it, Bri. Like, you're still making your own decisions. And for whatever reason, like, I choose to call that God, but like, I heard it first. She probably said it 1,000 times, but I finally surrendered. I did ask, a friend to be like, for me to go to detox, because now I'm like physically dependent on alcohol. I'm actually not gambling because I can't find a bookie. And every one of my friends that had bookies they were done with me, man. They were like, you got issues. You should not be doing this.
Thank God there are no apps.
I know. Thank God. I was just having this conversation with some of your staff. I don't know if I would be alive in the same landscape, because my sober date is a couple days after another Patriots Super Bowl when they beat Atlanta. So
it's almost like the apps are to gambling what fentanyl is to drug use, because like the way that you talk about that, like you really might not be here if the apps were here.
Yeah.
When you were gambling, I believe that about myself. Like if fentanyl was on the street, the way that it is now, there's no shot.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I finally go to a place that treated drugs, alcohol, and gambling, right? So I finally get the treatment at the inpatient level based in that. I spent 30 days there in Virginia. Still wanted to kind of come back to Brooklyn, and like, that's where I knew people in AA and GA. And then, but I surrender again. I end up down in Florida, West Palm, start running a sober house at like really early on in recovery.
So you're like me. You're one of these guys that just gets into the work right away.
Yeah.
And for some of us, I feel like that's like a necessary, I don't know what it is. For me, my sobriety is not contingent on what I do professionally. I believe that. But there was something, like for me, that was one of the first decisions I made in my new life, that I was actually going to work in behavioral healthcare and no one was going to tell me differently. And I was going to fucking do it, and I was going to do it well. And then I actually did it. Yeah. And that's where the hope comes from. Yeah. Because you get a lot of these guys out there, man, that are like, don't do the work in the first year. Or don't do this. I'm like, fuck, I don't want to be told no anymore, man. I didn't get sober to. So I love that. Yeah. So, I got luckily hooked up with the right guys down there. We ran this. And it's, so, back to like the entitlement, and, I grew up in a, middle-class family, but then I went to a college that was like very upper middle class. Where? And like Sacred Heart University. Yeah. And it was like, I look back on my time, because I work a lot around college students, and it's like, maybe having that Coke in my pocket or having the most amount of money on the game kind of leveled me up, because I didn't have this like, $100,000 Mercedes that they had. And, I think I would have earned my seat no matter what when it comes to, my recovery and my addiction. But I think it was pretty, that had a lot to do with it. So I ended up running this very, it was a tough house, right? It was like we get a lot of guys out of jail off the street, and it was like exactly what I needed, So I did that. Wait, can we go back? Yeah. So did I hear you right that there was a part of you that was gambling the amount of money you did to try to fit in and feel a certain way because of some of the people that you were around?
See, you are like a therapist. You're trained that way. But it's, absolutely. There was a lot of insecurity there when I look back. You wouldn't have seen that in my time there. But yeah, I think it became my identity. It became Brian knows more about sports than anybody else.
Dude, it's so fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I saw this thing from Mike Posner, and like, you know, he's a guy that's in recovery. He's open about it. And he does a lot of storytelling on social media. And he was going into something, you know, about like in his 20s when he was just like took the pill to be cool, or took the thing to get in the room with Avicii. Like he just did all this shit to say like, hey, I'm fucking here. Like, see me, you know? And none of that shit matters.
Absolutely.
Like, we do the craziest shit. And I think that for me, like, it happened. Like, I had another double down on that recently. Like, like so much of this shit doesn't matter, but we do things because, like, as human beings, we just want to be seen, and we just want to be a part of. And on the flip side, I feel like that's what our recoveries have given us, right?
100%. Yeah, no, it's a huge piece of it. So, yeah, there was a lot of hoop. There was 3 different sports. You know, tore both of my Achilles. Then, you know, golf was the only game I was going to be playing in college. Lost that, like, you're an athlete. You know, it's like I really lost that identity as an athlete. I needed to find it somehow. Here was sports and then gambling. And in that time, it was like, it's very different. Like, I enjoyed that underground aspect of it, right? Like, I enjoyed walking into a barbershop and dropping off an envelope, or like all that gritty aspect of it, right? And now it's like, boom, it's legal. We do a lot of, I think universities do a good job of this. It's called like social norming campaigns. Basically what that does is like, you know, like what were the messages that you got about college growing up?
I mean, you go there and you party and you are away from your family for the first time in your life, and you learn how to make your bed and maybe kiss girl, like whatever, like do the things that you now have freedom to do.
Yeah, but like drugs and alcohol is a part of it.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So a social norming campaign, and basically what it does is it just collects a lot of data on a campus, and then it sends it back to the students to kind of try to just like smash this. Like, actually, a less percentage of people are drinking 4 to 5 times a week than you think, right? That might be like the it crowd, or what you think is like the it crowd, but there's a lot of people who are there for an education. A lot of people there who are, you know, are there for the first time, first generational college students. There's a lot of, you know, athletes who are really committed. So the same thing, like now that gambling is legal, you have a softer look on it, right? So it's like it increased. Same thing, like I kind of, a lot of people, it's like, what's this comparison to? Is it cigarettes? Is it marijuana? Is it, you know, I like the oxy stage of the opiate epidemic. Like, I think that's a fair way to put it right now. But I think it's also how much access versus, I mean, the treatment side. But yeah, I mean, basically, if you're growing up and you're 8 years old right now, gambling is a part of sports, is, you know, the physical game, or the, you know, the injury report or statistics. Like, it's as embedded in there.
Yeah, I mean, shout out Grace Adams, who sent me an article first thing this morning. She knew she's helping us produce this whole thing, and she sent an article out from the Wall Street Journal today, and apparently, like, NBA TV next year, you're going to be able to log, like, and place game. Like, I have NBA TV because I got to watch my hometown Sixers up here in New York.
Sure.
And now apparently, like, if you're on the app watching, you can literally bet while watching the game, like, that's through the NBA.
Yeah, and then I
mean,
it's wild. And you also, that's the thing, is like, everybody wants to point the finger at DraftKings and sports, you know, DraftKings, FanDuel, all that stuff. But I'm pointing the finger a little bit at the media companies, the leagues. But I mean, they see it as a cash cow. It's good for ratings. It's good for advertising. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, I mean, I just have some crazy stats here. I mean, $119.8 billion in 2023 generated or transacted, $329 billion in economic activity. But the biggest one is 90% of people with a gambling problem will never get help. You know, and that's the one that sticks out for me, because I led with, I think, 750,000. I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there right now, but if 750,000 young people ages 14 to 21 have a gambling addiction, and only 10% of those, I mean, that's 75,000 people that'll get help, and another, you know, 675, if my math is right.
Yeah.
That will, you know, go on and keep burning shit down.
Yeah. I mean, so your home state of Pennsylvania just came out. There's like 2.3 billion that the state made in tax revenue on it. So from what I hear, like some interpersonal, relationships is like almost overnight Pennsylvania legalizing like wiped out the infrastructure of Atlantic City. So like that's like the economic power of this, which is obviously, a pushback. And then when you really get into the weeds here, gambling doesn't have a face like a Zach Clark or these people who are so open about it, right? And it's
Brian Dolan.
Yeah, I mean it's just sad because it's not the infrastructure of young people in recovery is not there. The infrastructure of like housing, like a lot of what Release does, is not there. So there's a lot of people that need help, and I think it's we're just at the tip of this, and it's just going to keep going and going. But big numbers, big money.
So I want to get to the happy part. When do you place your last bet?
November 27th, 2016.
And you know that date?
Oh yeah.
Nothing since then. That's like, just to be clear, like I'm talking March Madness right now. Like we're in the middle of March. Like you're not doing a bracket. You're not throwing in $5 for a nothing. Nothing. I won't flip a quarter with you for a quarter, right? Like it is zero. And if you're out with guys and like you're on the first tee and like they're like, hey, 5-5-10 Nassau, like easy, like, and you just have to like, what do you say?
Well, so that's an interesting thing that I still want to like compete, right? So like what I'll do is like, let's say you and me are playing golf, we'll take on the two guys, and then you have to put up all the money. I don't touch the money because I still want the the 6-footer to mean something, But so I compete, but I play in some tournament golf, and my dad stakes it, and if I win, he wins, not me. I don't touch it, And it's nothing.
To me, that's almost harder. Like everyone freaks out about when they're in early sobriety, going to a bar and having to order a club soda. Like I'd be terrified with my boys on the first tee, like saying,
I know,
like
I know. It's been hard. It's actually, I would say for me, like personally, like I know that I would bet first, right? And like what I mean by that is like a relapse for me would look like I'd place a bet, right? Yeah. And they, you really talk about like the addiction aspect. Like gamblers don't have that physical symptom, right? Like so we're able to, lie and manipulate at such a deeper level at some points than someone that's drinking a liter of vodka every day, So my point is like I have to be very careful around the gambling and
So I want to get into kind of, because part of this whole conversation, the conversations that we're having here is we're bringing experts on like yourself, someone who is a gambling expert, to share their experience and then offer some level of support or solution to this problem. But before we do that, I think I'm just curious to see like where are we going, dude? Where is this, like, where is the gambling thing going to go? Like if you had, like in 5 years, if we keep tracking the way we're tracking.
So the first thing I'll say is I think the sports betting is kind of like the gateway drug to like the online casino, right? So if you look at a lot of the trends in the sports betting, it's like 96%, 96% male. They're trying to attract more females. They're trying to get other people involved. And then I think you're also going to see, and I've already worked with some of these cases, but like the gambling on the video games. So I think that's like the big next exploding piece where like I don't think it's too far away from, a couple years from now, you can just on DraftKings play, Madden one-on-one against somebody and there's money on it and you're just normalize gambling. And then, so where does this go? I mean, I think it goes to, 38 states are now legal. I think all those will cross. I think that it is completely attacking young adults, young adult men, and we're not really there on the infrastructure of treatment side, and that's kind of scares me. Like I honestly have, my wife will, like, I'm anxious about it, right? It's a lot of things are happening. Like there's this big Ohtani story right now. Like obviously that's getting a lot of press around gambling, and it's like, is he involved? Like you and I think you shared this with me, is like someone's really sick in there and they need help, right? But that's not the big ticket thing to talk about. I can't give you like specific numbers, but I think we're in trouble unless we start to really grow community, which you've demonstrated so well. Like, I think if we don't do that, it's going to be an uphill battle. And I'll go back to, why is that? You're talking about value-based people. What I mean by that is like just treatment resistant, but also like, I want to see you for 10 minutes and be good. And I never want to have the urge to gamble again. Addiction's much stronger than that. And the other thing I'll say is that bond to sports. It's my identity. You don't have these like 8-year-old memories of you on a ball field throwing heroin back and forth with your best friend. These guys, that's what you're up against. You're up against, my dad coached me, and this is my whole life. So it's stronger than, especially when it comes to like the sports betting. And then the increase in my like day-to-day work, the increase in it has created way more like experts, right? You have more data on all this stuff. So what I mean by that, in my day when I was gambling, it was like, what we call like straight money line, or total, right? And I was a straight bettor. Now it's like you have so many different ways you can bet. You can really start to believe, oh, I have this figured out, and the segments and, Chinese basketball and a million different things, where it's like, I really feel like I'm an expert in this, and this is a way. Like, a lot of the people I work with are, a little, I don't know what I would call like anxious avoidant. They're not sure about, who are they going to be in this life, right? Like, college creates that. Like, college creates your time to launch. And I need to become financially independent eventually, if I'm not already.
No, I mean, dude, they have these like same game parlays now. I remember last fall. I mean, I feel bad talking about this, but go Phils. There was a game early on in the playoffs where, Castellanos, Schwarber hit 2, Harper hit 1, and I like dialed it all up before and put $50 on it, and like, won $5,000 or whatever it was, like just a nothing thing. But I was like, that was cool. But you bet your ass for every game the rest of the playoffs, I was trying to duplicate, that bet. So what ended up happening? I don't know. Like, did I break you? Like, and then you start to throw some other stuff in there. So it's fascinating. And the other thing that I think we talk about is, just like you need to eat food, like we need our phones. And so it's like we're carrying your bookie is in your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing I say, like, a family might call and they're worried about their son. And it's like, I'll say that. I go, it's been over 7 years, and it's a completely different landscape than when I tried to stop. It's harder, point blank, period, And so from there, I think there's so much of it. There's like the technology, right? Like, it's crazy to like think about this, but like, I used to call this 1-800 number. It's like 1-800-sports basically. And it would be like 1 for the NBA. And that's how I would get my scores. You talk to old timers in the rooms of like Gamblers Anonymous, and it's like, I would wait till the next day to see the newspaper, right? Like, you want to talk about. So now that I can see everything live constantly, I can place the bet from the phone. I mean, it's so all of it together, and kind of back to the college kid. It's like, I'm a broke college kid. I'm sitting on the couch and I want to buy the girl a drink at the bar, but I can't. FanDuel, hey, here's two free $100. Take your chance. What kid's not going to take a shot at that? And then what person at that age, brain's not fully developed, risk-taking behavior, all that stuff. It's like, what guy's not going to, win, turn that risk-free, sweat-free $500 into $5,000, and then I'm never going to touch this again.
Right.
I'm done. One of the biggest like risk factors is early success, like early wins. So, yeah.
So, okay, moving into the solution. Congrats, by the way. It's fucking awesome.
Thank you.
I can't imagine. But anyway, now today a family calls you. Obviously, this thing looks a little bit different than maybe a substance use disorder. There's behaviors around it. Obviously, it affects the family in ways that a lot of us can't even imagine because their bank accounts are being drained. Where do you kind of start when you start to assess the problem in the family and point them in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's like really getting some education around the family, right? I think that I believe that from my own personal story and a lot of people I've worked with, where like the family shifts first before the young, especially like when it comes to the young adult population. So, I mean, we got to draw hard boundaries around the money. We got to take some financial oversight, and it's a little bit harder, right? I have to develop real trust and buy-in with these guys because I can't test for it. I mean, I can put some, one of the big issues, like a bigger picture issue is self-exclusion, right? So you can exclude yourself off DraftKings for a year, 3 year, 5 years, lifetime, but then you can download FanDuel and go on that, right? So the testing aspect, like I'm just trying to create like honest dialogue for the first time about this with someone who's been there and can really speak their language. But yeah, it's a lot of financial boundaries. I think we're lost in all aspects, not just the infrastructure of treatment, but also we don't have evidence-based treatment like substance use. So we're 20 years behind, and I think you're going to see the gambling and like other process addiction just continue, right? Like you're talking about the gaming and just the phone and like so yeah, it's about that trust. It's that, can I get this individual to understand that I'm not here to like put them in trouble? I work a lot of guys that I work with, it's their first real time in any type of care, right? So it's a lot about educating the family.
You keep saying guys, do you just not see women with the same, I mean,
it's not that I like wouldn't work with a woman, but I mean, most of I see a lot more male. Yeah, I think the landscape, and I think other professionals in the space would say the same thing. They're seeing a lot of.
Any idea why?
I think it might have to do with the sports aspect, but I mean, I do know women that have struggled,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, and so how does this ESPN thing come to light?
Yeah, that was exciting. I mean, basically, I do a lot of work with the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling.
Okay.
So they're kind of always asking me, someone with lived experience who works in it, can you speak? And yeah, ESPN was doing a story and wanted someone to talk about it from the problem side. They did a lot of covering of how big the business was, how it's really changed the landscape of sports as a whole, and then they reached out to me knowing that I struggled with it and work with people, and it was a cool experience. We had Jeremy Schaap back as recently Monday night to do a panel. He's been great, and it's we want to hold more conversations around this topic, and it's great that you're doing it because it's everywhere.
Are the people behind that project, I mean, I don't need you to out anyone, but do you feel like there is some level of personal connection, or they just feel like it's a relevant thing that needs to be covered?
I felt like Jeremy and ESPN really wanted to show the whole side of it. What I'll say is the deeper you look into this thing, Zach, like the more you're like, wow, this is bad. What I mean by that is every council on problem gambling state by state is funded by the lottery, right? It's funded by losses. So everyone's kind of bought, like, I mean, there's a lot of people doing great work. Connecticut Council being one of them. They give us grant money at Sacred Heart to deliver this. And I'm not trying to, but everyone's kind of afraid to say, I'm here to represent the 4 to 6% of gamblers that can't handle gambling, right? But it's like, please play responsibly. Call 1-800-GAMBLER. It's not enough for some of these super acute situations. So I would say they truly wanted to show the whole story, ESPN. But I mean, Jeremy Schaap even asked Senator Blumenthal, like, he asked him, like, what do you feel like ESPN getting into that space with the launch of ESPN Bet? And the senator's like, I love ESPN, because, they're headquartered there, but it's like, be careful, and I hope you're doing some. So it's a hot button issue for a lot of people.
I mean, maybe I'm thinking about it too clearly, but if these states are making this much money off of gambling, shouldn't some of those resources go back towards something a little bit more sophisticated than 1-800-GAMBLER? Or
Yeah. So basically right now, every state is run differently. So like every state has different regulation when it comes to gambling, and so therefore the books can kind of operate differently state by state. And yeah, there's no federal money. So like compared to drugs and alcohol, there's no federal money. Senator Blumenthal was actually a huge component of what was known as the GRID Act. Still hasn't gotten passed. That was just asking for federal money to go to states. There hasn't been like a major study from like the CDC or anything like that on gambling in a long time. So we're like, we don't have good research. We don't have great treatment. We don't have, but yeah, it's funded a lot of schools, a lot of roads, spend a lot of money in the pockets for the states.
Cool. So I want to be clear on one thing, and then I want to hop into a little outside the box question that I'm genuinely just curious about, and I don't know how I feel about it. And I want to be clear. Like, I'm a sports guy. I'm a competitive guy. Like, all this stuff is resonating with me, and I'm thinking about my friends from home. Like, I don't know that anyone's there yet, but like they could get there, you know. And it's scary to think about someone kind of burning down their personal wealth just over a game. But anyway, so our promise is, one, we will make sure that everyone has access to Brian or knows how to find him. Obviously, that's probably a lot for him to take on. What other resources? Like, I just want to go back to that question about the family just starting out, just looking for something. Like, is there anything that you have found on a more altruistic level that has been, I heard education, I heard, starting with the family and then working towards the identified, I don't know what you call them, I guess patient in this case.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the infrastructure of Gam-Anon is great. I mean, it's spread very thin, like just a couple meetings in the city, from my understanding. Sometimes, like a lot of times in Gamblers Anonymous, they'll basically work at the same time. So there'll be like a GA meeting going on at the same time as a Gam-Anon meeting. But not enough. I kind of lean on some of those, like the New Canaan Family Support Group, or like Family Restored out of Massachusetts. Local families helping families type of stuff. And just, there's just like my parents, they kept it in. They didn't tell anyone, extended family. And, I think there's a parallel process there. Like, they felt a lot of shame about it and they didn't want to talk about it. And I think the more those families don't feel unique. I mean, yes, the other thing is, like in the state of Connecticut, if you call the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling, they will help not only a problem gambler, but they'll also help a family member. Nice. They'll give them counseling. So depending on where you are, they're going to break into, great organization. So yeah, just call those numbers. There's professionals. The state of New York, they have I think it's over 180 internationally certified gambling counselors that I think will work with both the families and the individuals.
Nice. Yeah, dude, it feels heavy. It feels like there's a lot of weight on you. I want to acknowledge just the power in you coming here today and talking so openly about this. Obviously it's going to take a shitload more Brian Dolan to really start to make impact, but I know we've talked about doing some stuff together, which I'm excited about. My last kind of, I don't know if I call it a fun question, but when I think about gambling, I think about Pete Rose, and like this guy has been banned from baseball for however many years for betting on himself. Where do you stand on players today betting on themselves, like in a game, on themselves? I think against themselves is a different story, but it's like,
Yeah, it's everyone else is doing it. Everyone in the stands is doing it. Why can't I? Like, that would be my perspective if I was a professional athlete. I think Epic Risk Management is also a great resource. They partner with all the leagues and give them education. Pete Rose, I feel like has a strong case right now to be like, why did you ban me when you're now like co-signing this left and right? And the thing I'll further say that is really scary in all this is, like, people I think who aren't like fully in it or never lived it, or just talk gambling a lot, they think about those like point shaving scandals, right? but it's like, it's information, man. Like so you think about a small college, like a Temple or a,
there's something
Villanova.
with Temple going on this year, right?
Yeah. So it's like, but it's not even just like if a kid gets involved, it's like if you have the information, like, I remember getting a call. I had a buddy at UMass back in the day, and he was tight with like the star shooting guard, and he's like, man, him and I were drinking till 4 a.m. He's not going to play well at noon. I got on the call with the bookie, and like, it's not even like the players need to be involved. It's like the information around that is valuable, just like trading and stocks and all that stuff.
It's wild. So you're not going to answer the question. Should they?
Yeah, no, I'm deflecting.
It's all right.
Yeah,
we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
I don't need any clickbait on your stance on whether Jalen Hurts should be able to bet on himself in the Super Bowl. All right. So my biggest takeaway is we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Some scary shit. I think the fact that we're talking about it is a great first step. And, I appreciate your vulnerability. Congratulations on all the good work you're doing. And I guess one more question would be just if you, what are the signs? What are the signs that someone's going down a dark path when it comes to gambling?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's, at the college level, we look at like, grades, attendance. I think more and more like agitated. I think it's because so many people are doing it. It's hard to see it at points, but I think, your son's constantly calling you for books 3 times in a semester. Like that's a problem, right? So I think some financial oversight and some honest dialogue. But what I'm really looking for, it feels like every time I start working with someone new, it's like this person knows more about sports than anyone I've ever met. And then the person before, and the next person is like more and more of like an encyclopedia. And I think it raises like a bigger question around like sports as a whole, right? Like we look at it as such like a great thing. There's another side to it. So that's one of my big warning signs is like unhealthful, just so obsessed with all things sports, and you can get it 24/7, Twitter, so that's a big warning sign, and just,
Sweet.